The fastest way to stay broke is to try to look wealthy. And the crazy part is, most of us don't even realize that we're doing it. So there's a psychology of signaling wealth. So humans naturally, they want to signal status, which that means, through clothes, through cars, through houses, through kids, the number of kids you have, through schools, which school you went to. All these things sort of, often confuse the signaling that is associated with actual wealth and actual success. And social media really magnifies this. If you look on social media, you see a lot of imagery of people with, nice clothes and fancy cars and lavish vacations, even, with YouTube. So I like to watch, videos of people traveling to different like hotels. And I like to watch the ones where they go to the luxury hotels and also to the worst rated hotels. And I find it interesting that I do enjoy watching the luxury hotel videos much more than the ones where they go to, the dump hotels. And honestly, what this does is it does signal in our brains sort of a new normal. So if you are constantly, for example, watching videos of these luxury hotels, then what that does is in your brain, like that's sort of what your expectation is. So when you go to like a regular hotel, you might be like, this place is a dump, because your brain believes that all hotels should be like the luxury hotels that you are seeing on Instagram or YouTube, or that your car that you drive is, a dump compared to the fancy cars that you are seeing other people drive within social media. And, because most social media is filled with people, displaying and showing off things that are rather expensive. You don't often see channels, which I actually would maybe enjoy, actually, of people showing, cars that are like complete trash and falling apart and they're taping them together and still driving them. Actually, I think that would be a fantastic series. I would like to see a bunch of videos of different people's cars that like are completely like crazy colors or whatnot, because they've been, the paint has faded and all this and that. But anyway, as I was saying, your brain gets used to seeing a certain thing and says that that is normal, and that you kind of expect these like expensive, lavish, hotels or vacations or cars as, as opposed to maybe something that's a little bit more modest. And so, speaking of cars, car payments, the car payment trap, right? So more and more people, or almost everybody, it seems, has a very expensive luxury car or an SUV or a truck. Trucks aren't cheap. And, that is one of the biggest ways to, look successful while also draining your cash flow. Okay. And unfortunately, people are doing this. They are financing their vehicles as sort of like a way to signal a success that, or a stability that they haven't yet actually achieved. You're more branding yourself with debt. And obviously, everyone doesn't know that you're doing that. I often wish that the backs of cars had, the monthly car payment amount that everybody was spending on the cars that they are driving. I would find that to be incredibly interesting, just to see, all of the vehicles on the road and what the monthly payment is on those that those people are paying. So people are financing things to keep up the appearance of being rich, but there is this hidden anxiety. There's a toll to be paid for that, as far as having to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, or maintain this image of being wealthy when you are not, because you are only a day away, perhaps, from like being completely bankrupt if you were to lose your income, and you still have all these payments to make. And then you might lose the status that of all these items if you have to sell them or if they are confiscated. So it's kind of like that every day you're like living this sort of lie to appear rich. And the truth is that quiet wealth looks really boring, but that is the way to build wealth and to be actually rich, is to, live below your means, live modestly, live in a home that is a little bit smaller, of course, maybe you could afford something larger in a, better neighborhood, but you don't do that because you want to have the extra cash flow to invest and actually build wealth by purchasing property or buying into index funds so you can become a small owner of different companies. So investing in the stock market, and then that way you are, or building your savings accounts so that you have a much larger emergency fund of actual cash, or buying into gold or Bitcoin or whatever you want to invest in. But when you actually are rich, it's a lot quieter and subtler for most people. Okay. Of course, we all see the people online who, claim to have millions, be making millions, have millions in their investment accounts. And whether they do or they don't, that's not really like the majority of rich people. Most rich people are just quietly living their lives in everyday regular neighborhoods. They're not flashy. They're not driving, expensive vehicles or taking crazy luxury vacations or wearing expensive clothes. They're sort of like, it's like that book, The Millionaire Next Door, which was written years and years ago. But most people who actually are millionaires, they're not making $1 million a year, and they're not spending $1 million a year either, right? They're just kind of earning their income, and they're keeping everything, their expenses low. That's the way to true wealth, is keeping those expenses low, staying out of debt. So that way the money that you make, the money that you have, you can invest and actually build real wealth, and you can save it. And then, of course, it's not about deprivation. Once you then reach, wealth, then you can spend money. You're just not ridiculous with it in the way that you're spending it. I mean, you're thoughtful, you budget for it, you save for it, and then you can really enjoy your vacations. Your vacations don't come home with you in the form of a payment. You can actually go and just be stress-free and be financially, independent, and live this life of financial peace, which to me is really what being rich is. And the most confident people that I know, they don't need this social validation, any kind of visible proof of their success. It's not necessary. And, I think that that's really important, because I often find that people who are driving the most flashy cars are the brokest people ever. And so it's an inverse relationship to me. What I don't see that as a signal of wealth. I actually see it as the opposite. And so, you have to redefine what success really looks like. And to me, that's low stress. And as I always tell the kids, it's like about having choices. I tell the kids, try to get good grades in school. If you choose not to go to college, that's totally fine, but you want the option to be able to go if you want to. And to me, that is success, where you're not like being told, no, you can't. If you made the grades, then you have the ability to go. But if you don't want to, that's fine. If you decide to go start a business and do something else, and, by all means, do that. But at least you would have had the ability to. So to me, success is when you have choices and you have, actual margin in your life where you're not like on the edge, where every dollar comes in has to go immediately out to make payments on the things that you have bought to maintain this sort of visual status signal to everyone that you're rich, which is absolutely completely ridiculous. I mean, my God, it's like, why? And I this is an interesting story. I heard this once from somebody in a podcast where they were saying that they worked as a valet. Maybe you've heard this before. And they, cars were coming in. People were driving these really expensive cars, luxury cars in. It was like a high-end place. And what they noticed was that every time that they were looking at the car, and imagining themselves in the car, and not really noticing the driver. Like the person who was actually driving the car, who was trying to display this symbol of being rich, that they weren't even looking at that person. They could care less about the driver or who was getting out of the car. So I challenge you to think about that. When you see something you want, like a house, maybe you're like, I love that house. What do you think in your head? I want to be in that house, right? I wish I could own that. You're visualizing yourself in that house. you're not thinking that person who is that person that owns that house? Who is it? I want to know who that is. You're not thinking that. Do you really care who the owner of that house is? No, you're probably hoping they get the heck out of there so that you could get the house. Or same thing with the car. You like the car, you're visualizing yourself. How can you get that same car? You could care less about the driver. You probably don't even look at the driver. You don't know who's driving the car. I know I have never cared who's driving a car or who owns a house, or, you know, if I see an amazing garden I like, I don't think about who did the garden. I'm just like, oh, I like that garden. I love those roses in that rose garden. I want those roses for myself, for my own garden. I'm not thinking about the owner and who owns those roses. So my point is, you know, really think about that. Like, do you really want to be going into debt and spending all this money to impress people who don't even care that you have it? They just want it for themselves. They don't care that you have it. They don't care about you at all. So it's not really the flex that you think it is when people they're not thinking about you. And yeah, everyone's always thinking about themselves. So if you haven't watched my video about the middle class trap, then you can go ahead and click here and see that video. And if you do, I'll see you there. And if not, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.